We all know the sensation. You stand at a crossroads, weighing two options, and you deliberate. You feel the friction of the decision in your mind, and then you take a step. The experience of independently choosing your own path is entirely visceral. That internal sense of freedom carries immense weight. It forms the exact bedrock of how we view human dignity. We hold a deep conviction that we choose who we become. When you decide to learn a new language, end a relationship, or change careers, your conscious ability to shape your identity feels as real and concrete as gravity. Without that lived experience of choice, our entire concept of personal responsibility, the very idea that we deserve praise for our triumphs or blame for our mistakes, collapses. But empirical science paints a very different picture. This diagram maps out the timeline of human decision-making under a functional MRI. Before you are even aware of making a choice, a burst of physical activity occurs in the brain. The neural machinery starts turning first, and the conscious feeling of deciding follows a fraction of a second later. If biology dictates the action before consciousness even registers it, the part of you that feels like the chooser is arriving too late to actually make the decision. It is merely a delayed echo of the initial physical spark. Evolution is notoriously efficient. It is entirely possible that our capacity for deep introspection and the compelling feeling that we are in control are simply elaborate survival mechanisms built into our hardware to keep us navigating a complex world. Follow this empirical evidence to its logical end, and human beings are reduced to biological passengers riding inside a complex machine. The concept of personal responsibility evaporates into pure mechanics. You might argue that the experience of choosing is itself a physical process. The agonizing hours you spend deliberating over a major life decision generate their own momentum, acting as a real causal force that alters what happens next. This diagram visualizes the trap of that logic. Every event requires a prior cause. The act of deliberation is tightly locked into place by your genetics, your upbringing, and the breakfast you ate this morning. It is just another predetermined link in an unbroken chain. When we label this automatic, heavily conditioned process free will, we might just be engaging in a bit of evolutionary flattery to protect our own egos. As long as we treat free will and determinism as opposing forces battling for control of our minds, we are stuck in an unwinnable paradox. The philosopher points out that this conflict might exist entirely because of the words we use. Neuroscience and human intuition could simply be two different languages attempting to describe the exact same river. The 17th century thinker Baruch Spinoza argued that true freedom is not a magical exemption from cause and effect. Instead, freedom is found in operating in alignment with your deepest nature. When we worry about our choices being predetermined, we assume there is an isolated self trapped inside the brain. But psychology increasingly suggests that this rigid, independent self is a convenient fiction. The most critical question to ask is not whether we are free from the laws of physics. The question is whether there is a cohesive we authoring these actions at all. Resolving this entire debate requires redefining freedom. It is an act of self-authorship operating firmly within the boundaries of nature, rather than a mystical escape hatch from physics. At a certain point, abstract debates about quantum states and neural networks fail to intersect with daily life. They do not change how human society actually operates. Look at our foundational institutions. Law, education, and parenting are entirely built upon the rigid assumption of human agency. A courtroom requires a defendant who could have chosen otherwise. And the data supports this approach. When we treat people as responsible agents who own their choices, we can measure the resulting improvements in human behavior, rehabilitation, and social trust. Whether free will is a hard biological reality or a carefully maintained collective illusion, it is an absolute utilitarian necessity for civilization to survive. Here is the ultimate paradox of this debate: the optimist feeling the weight of choice, the skeptic observing the brain scans, the philosopher analyzing the language, and the pragmatist building the laws. They are all factually correct. Free will is less a scientific fact waiting to be discovered in a laboratory, and more a deliberate, daily commitment we must make to ourselves and to others. Your genetics, your upbringing, and the mechanics of your brain write the first line of your life. But assuming you are free is the only way to write the lines that follow. You can stop agonizing over the invisible biological mechanisms driving your thoughts. You can focus your energy on building better environments and cultivating better habits. Because acting as if you are free is, in itself, a powerful causal force. It is a belief that consistently produces a more meaningful and better lived life.